3. Okay, so in this week's guitar lesson, we're going to be talking about triads, which are simple 3-note chords, easy to play, and how you can integrate them into your lead playing. It's a lot of fun to do, and it's actually pretty easy. I'm going to show you my thought process for this. And this is one of those things I wish somebody had sat down and told me early on as I was learning to improvise. I always thought that chords were reserved for rhythm playing. I didn't know that you could mix those two worlds. I didn't know you could use a chord in your lead playing. But when you do, it actually makes your lead sound a lot better. It's a little more sophisticated sounding, or more, I don't know, thought out or intentional. And so anyway, that's what we're going to be doing. In the first half of what I played in the intro, that was pretty much all played using triads. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this video. We're going to break all of that down. I'll explain where they all come from. I'll put the tab up on the screen and all of that. If you'd like to learn the second half of that lead, and also download the tablature for the entire lead, download the MP3 jam track, which I have in multiple tempos, and download the tablature for the rhythm part. I went ahead and tabbed out the rhythm track. This whole composition is just two acoustic guitars. One's playing rhythm, one's playing lead. So anyway, if you want all of those extras, you can get those by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP562. Okay, so this song is played in the key of E, but the first chord in this is actually an A chord. So we're starting, the first starting chord is your 4 chord. And I'm only mentioning that because I used to think that the first chord in the song told you what the key of the song was. And that is the case a lot of the time, but not always. And so this is one of those situations where the 4 chord, you're starting on the 4 chord. So first chord's an A, then it resolves to the 1 chord, which is your E. And you can actually hear that resolve there. Then it goes to the 5 chord, which is your B7, then back to the 1 chord, which is your E. So the chord structure for this song is 4, at least the first part of the song, 4-1, 5-1. All right, let's listen to this. We'll listen to the first part of the lead, and then we'll break that down. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm starting with the A chord, and this is what I played. So this is coming out of, let's go back to the cage system. We have to put that cage system hat on just for a minute. I'm thinking about my A chord right here, right? That's using the E shape. This is the A chord using the E shape. This is my A note up here on the 5th fret, 1st string, also 6th string. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking about or visualizing. And if we look at just the top 3 strings of that, that's your triad. That's where this triad's coming from. There's another one right below that, strings 4, 3, and 2, but they're both coming from this E chord shape. So connect that in your mind, however, makes sense. These triads live inside of these major chord shapes, which are all part of the cage system. So when I played that, that's what I was thinking about to get to that. Now, there was a little embellishment after that, which is where I'm keeping that bar on the 5th fret, those strings 1 and 2. I come up to the 7th fret, 2nd string, back to the 6th fret, 3rd string. So all together, that first part, which represents our A chord, then the song goes to the E chord. And I went like this. So look at what's going on there. I'm going from my A. Let's think cage system. A chord to the E chord. Light bulb just went off for somebody. You go, oh yeah, there's an E chord right there. Now, a lot of us think E chord, we think down here, right? But this is why the cage thing is so important, because you've got E's all over the fretboard. And so you might as well find the next closest one. It just makes the whole thing much more seamless. So if this was the E chord I was visualizing, and I'm just looking at the top 3 strings of that, it looks like that, which is the same shape as your D shape. That little triad, that little D triad lives inside of your C shape as well. So we have the A, and then the E right next door to it. 1, 2, 3. Then the song goes to the 5 chord, which is our B, and I always ask myself, where's my nearest neighbor? Where's my nearest B? And so we were just playing our E chord here, right? And then I remember, oh yeah, we've got a B using the A shape, using the G shape, that's even better, but both of them have this little triad in it, right? Strings 4, 3, and 2 on the 4th fret there. So I'm going from my E chord to my B chord using the G shape. And so you can, hopefully you can see that. You've got a triad right here, right? Now that triad is in my B chord using the A shape as well, but it just makes more sense to do this because I can go and walk it down from my B to my B7 using that shape that we've talked about. I'll put that lesson up for the G shape for those of you that are interested and maybe you're unclear about what I'm talking about. I'll put that up on the screen. This one I just did a few weeks ago. But anyway, from the beginning we've got A to E. Then we go to our B, and I walked it down just like that. So I kept the bar there on the 4th fret and then just walked that 1st string down, 7th, 6th, down to the 5th fret. And then I go back to the E, right? Remember we have 4, 1, 5, 1. So there's our 5. And then to get to the 1, we'll just go back to the E here. But instead of just going straight into it, I slid into it. It's these subtle little things that give your lead character. It doesn't seem like much, but I could do that, or I could arpeggiate it. Could have done that if I wanted. Lots of options here. I could even go to my E7 to get me back to the A, right? There's all kinds of things. Hopefully, I'm just mentioning this just to kind of get you thinking and you start going, oh yeah, I see where you're going with this. So after we slide into that E, I just arpeggiated it like that, just string 1, 2, 3. Then it just repeats. We go right back to the A, which we've already done, back to the E. Now this time when we go to the B, I played it different. I'm still playing off of this, out of this G shape, but instead of me playing sort of the top part of the shape, I went to the bottom part of the shape and went. Okay, so let's look at that. So we have that same triad, right? Which is just the bar there on the 4th fret, strings 4, 3, and 2. But remember this from that G-shaped lesson, which I put up on the screen. I'll put it up again, just as another reminder. But you've got the 7 chord there, the dominant 7 chord. That should be jogging your memory. You go, oh yeah, I vaguely remember that now, right? You got the triad. You can go up to the 7th chord. So what I ended up playing, that's what I was thinking about, was this 7 chord here, and I played a little sort of a lick around it like this. Right? But it's really all off of that chord shape, that 7 chord. So you can just pause the screen now and get the tab for that. But just remember that lick there. So anytime you're playing something and there's a 7 chord, you've got that lick. This is how this stuff works. I'm giving you the Lego pieces. You can build whatever you want with them down the road in whatever style, but that's a great little lick that lives off of a dominant 7 chord, and it's inside of that G shape. And then after that, I went back to my 1 chord. You can hear it resolve. I love this 7 chord to the 1 chord in this spot. Listen how beautiful that is. And you can see how easy it is. I just keep the bar there on the 4th fret. There's the 7 chord, the dominant 7. I just slide my ring finger down 1, and then I'm back to this. Now what I'm doing here is I'm back to my E chord. And some of you are going, wait, how is that the E chord? Before we were doing it like this. Well, now we're still in that same chord shape, right? It's the C chord shape, not the C chord. But now I'm just playing strings 4, 3, and 2, which is a triad. So you have a triad and a triad. Do you see what I'm saying? You just take those full chords, which are across, 5 strings, sometimes 6 strings, and we're just breaking them down into more like 3 strings. It just makes them more manageable. Now, to actually qualify as a triad, it needs to have the root, the 3rd, and the 5th, the 1, 3, and the 5, which is the chord. So, okay, so now we go into the next part of the song, which just goes back to the 1, which is our E, and it stays on the 1. Then it goes to the 5, which is our B7, back to the 1. And that's all that happens for this next part. It's just the 1 to the 5. Let's listen to that, what I played over that, and then we'll break that down. Okay, so I came up here and played this. To represent my E chord. Remember, we start with the E chord. Now let's look at what's going on here. So I'm coming up here to the 9th fret, and I have one finger on the 9th fret 4th string and one finger on the 9th fret 2nd string. Now what are these two notes? Let's think triads, okay? We're gonna connect this to a triad. This is what I'm thinking about. Remember, we're playing over an E chord, right? So I have my E chord up here using the A shape, or my E chord up here using the G shape. And both of those, the A and the G shape, share this little triad here. That's the key to the whole thing. So that's what I was picturing, was just that. So I can play that, and that would have sounded great. It's an E chord, so it would have been a perfect match. But it even sounds prettier, and sometimes, depending on what you're going for, to just play 2 of those notes. So I realize this is technically not a triad, but it's coming out of a triad. That's what I went for, was strings 4 and 2 out of it. I could have went for strings 3 and 2. That would have worked. And that would have sounded pretty. That would have been a harmonized 3rd. I went for the harmonized 6th. So I started a half step down and then slid up to it, just like we did for the E down here. Same thing, right? I hope you're starting to see this, that there's not a whole lot of different things happening here. This is a lot of repeated stuff. I repeat myself constantly. And so do most artists, actually. Once you kind of dive into their work, you realize, like, oh yeah, you're not reinventing the wheel every time. We reuse this stuff. So after we played this harmonized 6, I played this. Now that's not really a triad, but it's kind of a little lick, a little embellishment around a triad. Let's look at what's going on there. I'm doing a hammer-on pull-off between the 7th fret and the 9th fret on the 1st string, and then I come down to the 9th fret 2nd string. What am I thinking about as I'm playing this lick? I'm thinking about this. A triad. That's the top part of my A shape. So this is my E chord. Here's the bottom part of it. Here's the top part of it. So it's just another little triad, a little section of that full chord shape. So then I come down to now this is on the 9th fret, 2nd string, 3rd string, down to the 4th string. And those notes are in the triad. So that's how I played that. So as I mentioned, the song here just goes from the E chord to the B7 chord, or from our 1 chord to the 5 chord. So we were just playing all around this E triad here. So I'm in this neighborhood. So now the song is going to go to the B chord, and I went like this to play that for the B7. It's another triad. Now this is what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about my B7 chord right here. This is the same as my B chord using the E shape. Yeah, there's these 3 fingers making the E shape. If I remove my pinky, I get that flat 7, which gives me a B7. Now inside of that, if you look inside of that, you have this. This one is one that took me years. I didn't realize this until I was 20 years into playing probably. It's very simple, but it's just a triad. But it represents my 7 chord. So that would be like a B7 chord. But look at the shape. It's the same as your D shape down in first position, but I'm playing it up here where I've got my middle finger on the 7th fret 2nd string, 8th fret 3rd string, and then 7th fret 4th string to play that little triad there, which is my B7. But I started a half step down and went. So I played it like arpeggiated it, 4, 3, 2, and slid into it. Again, I repeat myself. You just go down a half step, you do something, and then you slide into where you're trying to get. And then that's how I went back to the 1 chord, back to our E. So after the B, I came up here to the 10th fret 2nd string, and then I do a hammer on between the 7th fret and the 9th fret on the 1st string, and then a pull off between the 8th fret and the 7th fret on the 1st string, and then back to that 10th fret 2nd string, and then a little slide there on strings 2 and 3 into, because this is where the song goes back to the E chord, that E triad. That's what I was thinking about, but I just played strings 2 and 3, which is technically not a triad, but it's inside of the triad, right? So I'm sliding into it like that. Half step down. There it is again. You see all the repetition here? Every time I play an E, I'm pretty much always sliding into some version of it like that. So this whole lick goes from the B7, it goes. Now, if you were wondering what these notes are, these extra little fill notes, that would be like my B Mixolydian scale. That's where that would be coming from. Okay, so I love this next part because we're going to walk from this triad, which is our E. Remember, the song is going to stay on an E chord now. So we're going to walk from this E triad up to this one, which is like my E shape, right? It's almost as think of your first position E chord. It's the same thing. We're doing it up here though. I'm only playing the top 3 strings exactly like I did over the A chord at the very beginning of this. That's where I'm going to. So I'm going from here to here. Now, you have a little lane to get you there, and this is something I've talked about quite a bit, but from this triad, you've got this little connection. If we go ahead and position our fingers like that, so that I've got my middle finger on the 10th fret 2nd string, ring finger on the 11th fret 3rd string, take that shape and walk it up chromatically up to here, which is inside of this triad. So you're connecting this triad to this triad via this little road here. And that's all that I'm doing there. So once I get up into this position for my E chord, I played little embellishment exactly like we did over the A in the intro, right? So I'm barring the first 2 strings there on that 12th fret, do a hammer onto the 14th fret 2nd string. And then I do a quick slide from my 13th fret 3rd string down to the 11th fret, and then I come down into this position. Now once I'm down here, I'm playing off of this triad, my E triad here. So these are just embellishments off of this triad. That's how I think of it. You've got all these things you can do between this 9th fret and the 11th fret on strings 3, 4, and 5. So that's where all of that's coming from. But you can see it's that triad there that I'm playing off there. All right, so that's a lot of information. I want to end this part 1 video here. Leave a comment below and let me know if this has resonated with you, or if any of this has been helpful, or maybe seeing something that you haven't thought of before. That always helps me and gives me encouragement that I'm on the right track. And also, let me know if something is confusing. I like to know that stuff too. So anyway, in the part 2 video, we're going to go over the second half of the lead. It's a lot less about playing specific triads. We're going to be playing in those same positions, but this is more about single string notes and some flat picking and some of that stuff. So that'll be all in the part 2 video. So come join us for that if you're interested in that. You can get that at activemelody.com. Weekly lessons page EP562. All right, we'll see you in part 2.